call to order the 25th meeting on the Standing Committee on Finance. Our agenda today is to discuss the main estimates 2009-2010. We have with us here today 3 officials from the Canada Revenue Agency and should have 4 officials from the Department of Finance. We'll have a 2-hour meeting here on the estimates. So we'll start with, I believe, Mr. Baker, you'll be presenting for the CRA, and then Ms. Harrison, are you presenting for the department then? So we'll start with you, Mr. Baker, for your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci beaucoup. Pleased to have an opportunity to be here today to present the CRA's 2009-10 main estimates. We're certainly prepared to answer any questions you may have. Joining me today are 2 officials from the CRA. To my immediate right is Jim Ralston, the Chief Financial Officer, and to his right, Philippe Denis is the Acting Deputy Assistant Commissioner of our Finance and Administration Branch. Our mandate at the CRA is, of course, to administer federal and certain provincial and territorial tax programs, as well as delivering a number of economic and social programs on behalf of the government. To fulfill this mandate, we are seeking a total of approximately $4.4 billion in resources through the 2009-10 estimates. This represents a $650.6 million increase over the amount displayed in the previous year, largely because of the timing of one large transfer payment. There are 2 transfer payments overall, totaling $431 million, and this accounts for 2/3 of the overall increase in authorities compared to last year's mains. The first transfer payment is $429 million and represents the forecasted 2009-10 statutory disbursements to provinces under the Softwood Lumber Products Export Charge Act. In 2008-9, $419 million was expended, and this was represented in sub-estimates B rather than the main estimates. The remaining transfer payment is just $2 million, and this is an increase in the Children's Special Allowance, which is a payment made in lieu of for children who are under the care of institutions in lieu of their parents getting the child tax benefit. The remaining 34.8% of the increase pertains to changes in program expenditures, of which $78.2 million is with respect to the Corporate Tax Administration for Ontario. Members may recall that we assumed responsibility for Corporate Tax Administration Ontario. I'm pleased to tell you, Mr. Chair, that is now fully functioning as of April of this year and has come off extremely well. We're very pleased with how that's progressing. L'augmentation du budget principal des dépenses de l'agence.
The increase in CRA's main estimates also includes a total of $38.7 million in resources in response to the 2007 and 2008 federal budget announcements. The initiatives to be implemented and administered by the CRA will address tax policy and legislative measures. Some of the key measures are the following: administering a tax-free savings account that amounts to $19.8 million, administering improvements to the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program for a total of $9.1 million, expanding capacity to combat terrorist financing through charities, $4.7 million, and implementing a provision to allow multinational corporations to file income tax returns in currencies other than the Canadian dollar, such as the euro or the US dollar. This represents $4.4 million.
There's an additional $78.3 million in the mains to fund the salary increases attributable to new collective agreements. And this is particularly with respect to an agreement signed with the Public Service Alliance of Canada in December 2007. Finally, Mr. Chair, there's a number of minor adjustments totaling amount of $24.4 million, and these cover both, this is a net amount, includes some increases and some decreases. So that, Mr. Chair, is a quick overview of what these main estimates represent in terms of year-over-year changes, and certainly I and my colleagues are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. We'll now go Ms. Harrison for your opening statement.
Good morning. Je m'appelle Sherry Harrison et je suis...
My name is Sherry Harrison. I am the Executive Director responsible for the Financial Management Directorate at the Department of Finance. With me today are departmental officials who are here to assist me in responding to your questions. I would ask them to briefly introduce themselves and their roles.
I'm the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Economic and Fiscal Policy.
Alfred Leblanc, Relations Fédérales Provinciales. Jeremy Rudin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Financial Sector Policy.
Nous sommes ici aujourd'hui pour répondre à vos
We are here today to answer your questions on the 2009-2010 main estimates for the Department of Finance. As you are aware, the department's responsibilities include preparing the federal budget, developing tax and tariff policy and legislation, managing federal borrowing on financial markets, administering major transfers of funds to the provinces and territories, developing regulatory policy for the country's financial sector, and representing Canada in international financial institutions and fora.
The Department of Finance will focus on continuing to manage economic and fiscal policy issues in response to the economic outlook. The estimates that have been tabled in the House identify total budgetary requirements for the Department of Finance of $82.9 billion. It is important to note that $82.4 billion, or over 99% of this amount, relates to statutory votes for items that have already been approved by Parliament through enabling legislations. These include items like the payment of public debt charges, Canada Health and social transfers, and equalization payments. These statutory votes are displayed in the estimates document for information purposes and will not be included in the appropriation bill. Within the statutory votes, there is a net increase of $2.9 billion over last year, with the major contributing factors being a $4.7 billion increase in transfer payments to the provinces and territories and a $1.8 billion decrease in public debt costs. The non-statutory votes of the Department of Finance show a decrease over last year. This consists of a $43 million reduction in grants and contributions, mainly due to reprofiled amounts from 2007-08 to 2008-09 of certain grants, updated estimates of debt relief in 2009-10, and the completion of contribution payments in 2008-09. The decrease is partly offset by contribution funding related to the transfer of the Toronto Waterfront Revitalization Initiative and Harbourfront Centre from Environment Canada. Additionally, there is an increase of $3.8 million in the operating vote. This is mainly due to the transfer to the Department of Responsibility for the Toronto Waterfront Revitalization Initiative and Harbourfront Centre, and increases for advertising campaigns, which are time-limited, and security regulations. These increases were offset by reductions resulting from the strategic review reallocation, amongst others. Nous serons maintenant heureuses de répondre à vos questions au sujet du budget.
We would be pleased to address your questions that the committee may have on these main estimates.
Mr. McKay for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses. My first question is to Mr. Baker, which was my last question to Mr. Baker the last time he was here. And I've written to you subsequently, and you did respond, and I'm still not clear. The government, to great fanfare, introduced the tax-free savings account, and so I was trying to get a handle on what this is actually costing in terms of reduced revenues, actual out-of-pocket expenses, and things of that nature. And so on the actual out-of-pocket expenditures, it appears it's around $19 million, declining over years to around $15 million on an annual basis. It's going to use up about 100, well, it starts out about 100 people, and then it ramps itself up to about 180 people just to run this plan. But what's not clear to me is how much revenue is actually foregone in order to do this plan. So my first question is it fair to say that in the first year you're going to be down $20 million if there's not a dime put into this plan? Is that fair? Certainly, that's approximately the amount that's been set aside to cover the costs to the Canada Revenue Agency to set up the systems and other information, web sources, publications to support the administration, regardless of the actual flow-through on that measure.
Are there any other costs that are actually associated, out-of-pocket expenses on the part of the government in order to be able to start this program?
At this point in time, that estimate would be all in. It would be everything we think we're going to spend.
Okay. So again, if there's zero uptake, we're down. The government's revenues are down $20 million, or their expenses are increased $20 million, however you want to put it. So then the second question is, in that first year or second, as the case may be, what are the foregone revenues of the Government of Canada in order to be able to fund this, just the foregone revenues, not to fund anything, really. What are the foregone revenues?
Well, sir, I think my response is not going to be unlike my response when I was here before. First of all, it's a new program. We do not have any experience with the administration of this. We do not know yet what the uptake will be in terms of the number of taxpayers who choose to benefit from this program, nor the amount of money that will go into it. It's also, as we observed last time we met on the context of the subs, that it's an interesting year, so it's probably a bit more difficult than normal to predict the uptake. But certainly, our colleagues from the Department of Finance may have some estimates based on the year, but that is certainly their responsibility.
It's an extraordinary response when you think about it, Mr. Baker, to say, well, we know that it's going to cost us $20 million, but we're not quite sure what the benefit to Canadians might be. I'm not trying to be awkward with you, Mr. Baker, but it is an extraordinary response. So maybe I could turn to our folks at Finance and say, you know, what are your foregone revenues going to be, Mr. Rochon? You're looking like you've got that answer at the tip of your tongue.
I don't have it immediately on the tip of my tongue. It was reported in the 2007 budget. The cost of this program will rise over time as take-up increases. And Brian, do you have my recollection is that it's in the neighborhood of $2 billion a year at maturity. But Brian, I'll let you comment more specifically on that.
Just introduce yourself, sir, for the committee.
Yes, it's Brian Ernewine, and very quickly, I don't have the numbers with me as well as the 208 budget, but we will get those and return to the table with them.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to have to live with that response, and we'll move on then. And so is Mr. LeBlanc returning with the response, or we're going to have to reply formally on that?
We have to do a formal response, or can someone reply?
No, we'll get back to you by the end of the meeting on the
okay.
Within the meeting?
exact numbers.
Within the meeting.
Okay. So if I could come back on that.
Yeah. 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm looking. I direct this question to Ms. Harrison. I'm looking at S. Let's see. Am I reading this correctly? That the interest costs of the government have been reduced from $33.6 billion to $31.8 billion. Is that correct? For a saving of $1.8 billion?
That's correct. The decrease of $1.815 billion, or 5.4%, is due to a revision of forecasted interest rates on the public debt.
Okay. So what seems difficult for me to understand is that that could reasonably have been anticipated when the main estimates were presented. So why is it now that we're receiving a note that your interest costs are down roughly $2 billion?
Yeah, this is a comparison between the 2008-9 and 2009-10 main estimates, right? So the main estimates that were presented in February of 2008. And so this represents changes between February 2008 and February 2009.
So the swing is $2 billion.
$2 billion because market interest rates over that period declined.
Okay, thank you. And the final question has to do with the 42 million, or 43, almost 43 million, and you said something about the Toronto waterfront, and I didn't quite pick it up.
The Toronto Waterfront Revitalization Initiative and Harbourfront Centre is a transfer of contribution programming from the Department of Environment.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand that. What do you mean a transfer of?
In 2008-09 main estimates,
Yes.
the funding for those initiatives were reported under the Department of Environment, and in 09-10, the responsibility for that programming has been transferred to the Department of Finance.
And what was the rationale behind that?
Right. Okay. So our understanding is that that specific transfer is a change related to responsibilities, issues related to machinery government.
Was this because the finance minister is the minister responsible for the GTA, and so therefore it comes under his purview?
I can't speak to the specific initiative in this case.
Okay, well, can we thank you, Mr. Can we get a more formal answer either within the 2 hours or to the committee?
We can get a more formal response to the committee, absolutely.
Thank you. Monsieur Laforêt.
Mr. Laforêt, over to you. Good morning, witnesses. My first question is for Mr. Baker. You are the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Revenue Agency, and you have been serving since 2007 for the last 2 years. The CRA has decided to centralize services with respect to the paycheck services and centralize those services in Shawinigan. I assume that there's rationale behind that decision. Now, somewhere in your numbers, would you be able to explain to us what exactly the justification was, the financial justification to centralize those payment services to Shawinigan? You are certainly most aware that there have been significant problems, in fact, inadmissible problems that have struck that pay center since the decision was made. A lot of the employees are seasonal workers or part-time workers, and they have seen a lag in receiving their paycheck. In fact, some of them have worked for 10 weeks without seeing a penny. And they are not being paid at the regular, during the regular timeline, during the regular calendar. This is totally unacceptable. We've talked about this in the House of Commons. We've raised this with the minister. Now, I know I'm asking several questions, but can you tell me that such problems will not recur? And what is the plan in place to make sure that such an incident does not occur again?
Merci beaucoup. Je vais répondre à votre deuxième question.
Thank you. I'll answer your second question first and talk about some of the problems. It's true. Since those paycheck centers were established, there were a few issues that emerged, and I'm happy to tell you today that we have resolved them. Before yesterday, there was a media report in the Canadian Public Service Alliance newspaper saying that the problem has been resolved. Mr. Baker, we're in May, and people are coming back now because they are seasonal workers. They haven't worked for the past few months, and the CRA is unable, is incapable of managing employees who are coming back to work during this very busy tax season. This is a serious problem, and you're telling me that the problems are being addressed and resolved. But peak season has already come and gone. But, you know, the autumn is going to come, and can you tell us that the problem is not going to recur? Mr. Chair, I am following and tracking this problem very attentively. And for now, there is no serious problem. We've found solutions, and I am confident that the issue has been resolved. It's very serious. It's a big problem when somebody doesn't receive his or her salary. But we've taken all the measures necessary to make sure that the problem was resolved. And obviously, I'm tracking it very closely. With respect to your second question on the justification of establishing those pay centers, obviously, well, generally, each department has its own office that is responsible for compensation. But quite frankly, the model was ineffective. In fact, it was totally non-efficient. And when I arrived, we set up 200 compensation centers, one in Shawinigan and a few in Winnipeg. There is a backup system. If there is a problem in one center, we have means of shifting our operations elsewhere. But to date, everything has been working very well. We have been able to post significant savings. I don't have at hand the document that justifies that decision, but I know that it was a good one. Thank you. Ms. Harrison, at the Department of Finance, you are obviously well aware of the current economic situation and the fact that the government presented a budget that it called a financial plan to get us out of the recession. The budget was tabled in January, and things deteriorated significantly since then. I would say that the recession was, in fact, 3 times more severe and deeper than what the forecasters had predicted. Do you have a financial plan to overcome or make up for the gaps between the January forecast and the situation that we are currently in now? I think one has to keep in mind that when the budget was tabled in January 2009, the government made a decision to include a forecast that was much lower than other forecasts. And the economic risk, despite the adjustments, have been on the downside. And it is in that context that the government's stimulus package is rather broad and has been judged as broader than other OECD and G7 countries. One also has to keep in mind that in Canada, the federal government takes up 50% of government tax base. And it has taken stimulative measures. So when we look at all of the measures included under the economic plan, we believe that they are among the broadest in the world. You say that they're among the broadest measures, but that is compared with OECD countries, and yet we are still ranking below those countries. No, I don't think so. The OECD countries have posted different numbers, and the figures show that Canada has an economic plan that is among the most broad in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming this morning. And I have a variety of questions, and I may actually get more than one slot to ask. So I'm going to start with finance first. So it's my first, and some of the questions are a little bit sort of broad in nature. I have my estimates from 3 years now I've been on the committee, and I have all 3 books. And there's been some changes. I just want to give you an example. In the main estimates for our fiscal equalization payments, actually it's gone from, in our first time we had it, it was back here, it's gone all the way from 11 billion or so in that range, 11.6 to 16, a little over 16, which is like a 42% increase. Here's my question to you. It's great that I get these estimates, and they are called estimates. It's basically the budget. It's the planned spending, if I understand it correctly. How come I never see the actuals? Where would a member of Parliament actually see the actuals? I'm assuming what we say we're going to pay the provinces, we're paying them. So that 42% over the last 3 years has gone out. But, you know, I'd like to see, there are line items that we might not have. So where do I find those actuals, and why are they not presented in the budget documents?
In the fall, the departmental performance report is tabled. That would have information on the actual costs of the prior fiscal year, as well as the public accounts of Canada are similarly tabled in the fall and relate to the prior fiscal year expenditures.
And the public accounts will provide you a reconciliation of amounts that have been requested in the main estimates versus actually spent.
But that goes to, through the TB, through the Treasury Board, to, does it come to these committees directly?
No, it is tabled in the House of Commons by the President of the Treasury Board.
So for us to make a change, because I'm just looking for improvements, we need to refer to, you'd be willing to come back to talk about what the actual said we were going to spend and what we were actually spending, and that would happen late in fall. Is that correct?
That's correct. Once we actually know what we've spent and the amounts have been audited by the Auditor General.
Okay. The other sort of general question I have is one thing I'm always nervous around here about is that, which I hadn't experienced before, was that you got 3 other chances to come back and ask for more money. Now, the Finance Department doesn't do it as extensively as some other departments do, in my view. But how, is there what are we expecting based on the budget that's been, the Economic Action Plan that's been passed, that's not in these documents, because these documents are prepared last fall, basically, right? What are we expecting from the Finance Department that was in the Economic Action Plan that are not in the mains but should be in the subs?
So within the department, we don't think there's anything significant. There may be an odd adjustment related to the financing, extraordinary financing framework to the extent we need operating expenses.
Okay. Another question I have for you. Oh, sorry.
Government-wide, though, this year will be somewhat exceptional in that the Treasury Board Secretariat is well, first, within the main estimates, there's about 35, as you all know, and then the Treasury Board Secretariat is planning to table an early supplementary estimate to obtain appropriation authority for the full range of budget items which have not already been appropriated or legislated under separate legislation.
Okay.
If I may add, we'll also use the supplementary estimates process as required to update the statutory forecast information.
Okay.
Those are the items that have been approved through enabling legislation. So where there's a material forecast change from the previous main estimates, we'll update that in supplementary estimates as well.
Okay. I had an opportunity when I first got here to be on the Government Operations Committee, and there was an over and under report. I think the number was 25 million over and under, and then you had to report it. Is that only reported to ops, government operations, or is there a reason we don't see at each committee how each department's doing plus or minus on their estimates?
The departmental performance report that I referred to that is tabled in the fall will provide the estimates funding, mains, plus the various supplementary estimates received funding against the actuals with a narrative explanation of the changes. And as I said, that's tabled for all departments by the President of the Treasury Board late in the fall.
From an accountability point of view, I think it's I like the estimates meetings. Some of us aren't as keen on it as myself, but I think we should have you back to talk about that report that comes out and actually what's actually spent. I have a question just out of interest. You did, or you're getting an answer on the waterfront revitalization issue, but if I look at the grants under compensation to Canadian agencies and entities established by an act of Parliament for the reduction of debts of debtor countries, that varies over the last 3 years considerably in terms of the amount of money. Can you explain to me why that is?
I'll let my colleague Jim Haley provide more details, but effectively these are payments we make intermittently to international organizations. They aren't annual payments, but Jim, I'll leave you expand on it.
That's correct, Paul. This debt forgiveness is granted under various international agreements, including the HIPC initiative. And under the HIPC initiative, a debtor country will enter into an agreement with the IMF to undertake a series of economic reforms. And the reforms are essentially the policy measures that will ensure that when we provide the debt relief, the benefit of that debt relief will go to the people. It will essentially create the conditions for strong growth. And so, depending on where a country is, any particular country is in its HIPC program, it may or may not be getting the debt relief.
So how far in advance can you budget for this? Last question on this round? Okay. So in terms of budgeting, since it varies considerably from year to year, how far in advance do you know how much we're going to be paying?
We essentially take a fairly optimistic approach to this in the sense that we assume that the country will meet all of the HIPC critical points in terms of its performance. Now, if a country doesn't meet that key condition or that key criteria, then it doesn't get the debt relief, and so our numbers will change. I should also note as well that the numbers fluctuate as some countries complete their HIPC process and the debt is written off. For example, last year Iraq completed its HIPC process, so we had a large debt forgiveness last year, but we don't have anything for Iraq this year.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mulcair, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Mr. Baker. I want to thank him for a very succinct presentation. I'd also like to press upon him that I do not seek to bring him into a political debate. I have too much respect for him. We'll take care of the political matters. But I do want to address a few administrative and technical questions. I'd like to understand the following. I had the opportunity to meet with a few former employees of JDS Uniphase and Nortel. They are currently being taxed for the very first time on phantom income. What this means is that they had bought rights or stocks, if you will, with their employer. They had purchased into options. The value of those options rose to $115. They never saw that money, but they were taxed for the very first time, and in some cases taxed hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, this is an option. This is a method that is given by the employer, and so they could have written it off as capital gains, but they didn't do so. Yet, the imminent bankruptcy of Nortel means that it will be in a position of deemed disposition. I know that there have been suicides in the United States because of these scenarios. Here in Canada, we have a case, GDS Uniphase in British Columbia, where a few dozen employees were able to reach an agreement with your department, and they were spared of that problem. And they never had to pay anything. And many people here in Ottawa are actually grappling with this very issue. So once again, Mr. Baker, I'm not seeking to draw you into a partisan debate, but how is it that in the case of some employees in British Columbia, living in the riding of Mr. Lunn, why is it that in some areas there are employees who are exempt, and for other employees who are in the exact same situation located here in Ottawa are not receiving the same treatment? Administratively speaking, how can you reach that very same result? First and foremost, this is an issue of tax policy. our mandate within the CRA has been stated. In the case of employees in British Columbia, they are subject to a very specific decision that was made by the government to deal with that case in a different way. And it is incumbent upon us to enforce the act or law as written. I'm not sure I understand everything you're saying, Mr. Baker. You embody the state. And I'm asking you a question on how you administer the act. You can certainly draw the nuance. You don't draft bills or legislation. I'm not talking about changing the act. I'm asking you, as the commissioner for application, why is it that JDS Uniphase employees were treated differently from Nortel employees located here in Ottawa? They find themselves with exactly the same problem, and yet they are treated differently by the government. Why is that? That's my question.
Canada Revenue Agency the tax treatment of stock options, stock purchase plans is clear under the Act, and we administer in accordance to that. Unless and any change in light of economic developments or economic distress would have to be considered by the Minister of Finance if they wish to change the Act. Now, the government has provision through the remission order process to make specific decisions in cases where it deems that some type of relief is required, and that is available through a statutory process, the remission process, and that would be the mechanism. That is not a decision I or officials in the Canada Revenue Agency would make.
But we understand each other that one of the foundations of our society that is based on the rule of law is that the law applies equally to everyone. Now, governments can decide that a remission order will apply in a certain case, but it is the fundamental nature of our society that the same rules apply to everyone in the exact same situation. And for the third time, I'm trying to understand how it is that with employees of JDS Uniphase in British Columbia, we have remission orders and one treatment with regard to their stock option process, and we have other people, notably with Nortel here in the Ottawa region in particular, where they've already been banged out, many of them for several $100,000 up here. And now that Nortel is about to go bankrupt, they're going to get hit again for several $100,000 because of the deemed disposition. How is it possible in a society based on the rule of law to have different treatment for identical situations based on the same statute? That's my question for you, Mr. Baker.
The Canada Revenue Agency has, in certain areas, some discretion. I'll give you a different example completely, but for instance, we've used the authority we have to extend the filing season for victims of the Manitoba flood. They have until the end of May to file their tax returns, and that's something that we have as a discretionary authority. When it comes to a different interpretation or a different application of the law, that's a decision of the government, and our job is to administer.
I'll ask you another way. And again,
1 minute, Mr. McCullough.
I'm mindful of not drawing you onto my turf of the politics of it, but I will ask you this. Can you name me one other case that you know of where people who are in different parts of Canada who have an identical revenue situation have totally different treatment by their government? Do you know of any other case?
Certainly I'm not equipped to respond to that. I'd have to look at. That's many years. We've had tax administration now for 90 years. I'd have to see if there are examples.
Would you get back to us?
But I'm certainly not aware of any as we speak.
Neither am I. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Hall-Finley, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to follow on questions from and thank you very much, everybody, for being here this morning. I want to follow on some of the questions from my colleague, John McKay, on TIFSA. And this follows a number of questions that I had actually been pursuing in the Government Operations Committee as well. And this has to do with the cost of the program, the $19–20 million. And we had asked quite a long time ago, when the forecasting was done, how many taxpayers did this involved. So in establishing the estimates that this program would cost $20 million, and if I remember correctly, a significant portion of that was implementation, and then there was some portion of that that was advertising. And I have another question, because my understanding is that there was an additional advertising component in addition to the $20 million, but I remember that it was in finance. So that's another question. But the first one is, we never really got an answer of how many taxpayers were expected to take up this program in order to establish a forecast of $20 million to implement the program.
Mr. Chair, I do believe we actually did reply back to the committee, and the figure was 8 million. The estimate was based on 8 million Canadians opting to open up tax-free savings accounts, and that information was provided on February. It was a follow-up, so we would have provided that in the coming weeks following our appearance on SUPSB in February. So 8 million was the figure that went into the design calculation to set up the administration of the tax-free savings account.
Okay, so that's thank you very much. So that confirms the response. Have you a sense, one, that number is, now that we're into the tax filing season? I know it's too early to confirm, but do you have a sense, given the economic situation, whether that's in line with what's happening?
Frankly, it's way too soon to tell.
Yeah, okay.
Because people can operate up to the end of the year to do this, and I suspect many will. They'll see what their overall economic situation is, just like when people make contributions to RSPs. Often it's done at the last minute when they decide whether they can afford to or not, or what's in their best interest. So that question, we'll honestly have to wait, I think, until we get through the current year to have a reasonable answer to that.
Okay. Another part of this, earlier the response was the estimate of foregone revenue was about $2 billion a year. In those forecasts, in order to, because we don't know yet, but someone will have had to have done an analysis to determine that as an estimate. To determine that, I'm assuming that one would have to have some idea of the average income of the people who would be taking advantage of this, and to what extent. So 0 to the 5,000. Can you give me some idea of that number? What's the average income, or perhaps not even the average, but the median? What are the numbers that you used in terms of the nature of the taxpayer who would be most taking advantage of this program? In the forecast, obviously you can't answer the fact, but in the forecast.
Certainly, as indicated earlier, the forecast would have been developed by our colleagues in the Department of Finance, and with your permission, perhaps they would be better able to respond to that.
Sure. Open that up.
Thank you. To answer the revenue estimate question first, and to fulfill the undertaking to come back to the table on that point in response to Mr. McKay's question, Budget 208 did include the revenue estimates for TIFSA. Very quickly, 089, a very small amount, or relatively small amount of $5 million, growing as tax-free savings grow, of course, to $50 million for 9-10, $190 million for 10-11, $290 million for 11-12, and $385 million for 12-13, for 2012-13. And in the budget it says that the cost expressed relative to the size of today's economy is expected to grow to over $3 billion annually. So it is a program that, of course, as savings grow and on a tax-free basis, the cost would grow. You had asked about the methodology that was used to determine that. We do have profiles as to the various sort of income levels and of course, consequent tax payable at various income levels of individuals. But again, this relates to the 2008 budget. I'm afraid I don't have any of that material with me today to share.
20 seconds.
The reason for the question, if it's not sort of politically obvious, is that there is a concern that this program will have cost a great deal of money, both in terms of implementation, and I'll have to wait for the next round, hopefully, to ask some more questions about some real concerns about the cost of implementation that are very high, and the significant proportion allocated to advertising when the private sector is doing, but specifically the high-income people who will take the most advantage of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Monsieur Carrier, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Carrier. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My first question is for Mr. Baker, who represents the Canada Revenue Agency. As you know, your agency is probably the first point, the front line, and the first point of contact for taxpayers because you're responsible for collecting taxes. However, in the implementation of your mission, in many, many cases, your work is very poorly perceived. I've had a few cases addressed to me about how you enforce certain policies. Allow me to talk about 3 cases that are currently under review. They concern your agency. They concern postdoctoral trainees. And in the case of one university, you have deemed that the scholarships received by those postdoctoral trainees do not count as scholarships, and so you are taxing them, and those scholarships are very important for them to conclude their research projects. There's another problem as well. There are cases that you are imposing a greater tax rate on for those who have converted from being self-employed to private enterprise. And there's also the case of truck drivers and the per diems that they receive because they are always on the road, and you believe that those per diems are not deductible, and so you, in fact, are taxing the amount that they are receiving to carry out their work. I know you're doing a good job, but some of these policies are highly questionable. So my question is, why, when you review your policies, do you not consult people, or at least advise them that henceforth, for the years upcoming, you are actually going to be changing the way you collect taxes rather than act retroactively and collect those taxes after the fact? These people, in many cases, do not have the money to pay up. It's that entire component of the problem that I find highly regrettable. I've received many complaints about your actions. There's also the issue of contraband cigarettes. And where are citizens' rights? They are trying to keep just a few dollars compared to the millions and billions of dollars that you are losing. What are your comments on that? Mr. Carrier, you've raised many issues. First and foremost, our goal as an agency is to provide exceptional service to the public. Each Canadian in this country is our client. We have many services to respond to their questions, and we have ways of resolving problems. Obviously, even with our 25 million taxpayers and 2 million businesses and many other people who are taxed and are a part of our tax system, problems can arise. We have to review each and every case with knowledge of the law and policy, and if people are not happy with a decision, there are ways to appeal these decisions. In fact, there are thousands of people within the Canadian Revenue Agency who are responsible for carrying out an independent review of each case. That system works well. If taxpayers remain dissatisfied with a decision, it is possible to turn to the Canada Tax Court. It's a system that works well. Generally speaking, our goal is to provide exceptional service. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move to my next question because time is running out. You have a very powerful machine at your disposal, and you collect taxes, and then you are telling me that there is a way of recovering that money. But people, in the meantime, are losing money. Average citizens are losing money. And that's what's pitiful.
Mr. Chair, these are difficult economic times. We have certain flexibilities in the Act and in policy. For instance, if someone is in arrears, we attempt to work out a payment schedule. It's not our interest to see anybody go bankrupt, personal bankruptcies, see businesses go out of business, and we make our best efforts to try to work out an arrangement that makes sense. At the end of the day, we have to administer the Act, and we try to do that as fairly as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just quickly to finish with finance and then move on to CRA, what would be, in our estimate books, we have mains for this year, mains for last year, so the budgets for last year, what we plan on spending. Would it be, and then there's a difference in what we plan on spending, what we didn't. Is it, based on timing, would it not be possible for us to have a column that says actuals for, in this case, 2008, 2009, so we could compare to what you said you were going to do, what we said we were going to do, and what happened? Is there an issue with timing that could not appear in these books?
The 2008-9 fiscal year, which just ended this past March,
right,
will be. We would have audited financial statements sometime in September, October. So we could go back one more year
go back
to 2007-8 and show you the information that you're looking for. That is in the public accounts, however. In fact, it might be simpler just to reproduce the page in the public accounts for the department that would provide that reconciliation you're looking for.
Because I'm spending time, which is fine, but to make it easier for the political side to read these things, having an understanding where we're coming from. Like, in actual fact, in 2006, 2007, we've gone, for example, on the payments to International Development Association, we're up 20.7% if we spent all that money that's allocated in these budgets. And I'd like to know whether we did or not. I'm assuming we did. But so that's the kind of information that I think was helpful. So I appreciate the answer, and I'll follow up with that. I have another question, but I'll deal with I'd like questions for CRA now, and I have a few. First of all, I appreciate the work, obviously, and as with the finance department. In your overall review, I see the FTEs planned for this year is slightly less than last year. Is that an accurate statement? You go from 39,000, I think these are in thousands, 39,795 to 39,481. What's causing the number of employees to go down?
First point I'd say, Mr. Chair, is it's difficult to do a point-in-time, year-over-year comparison because invariably, in the case of the CRA, we have because, for instance, while we're based on at a point in time, that's our forecast number of full-time equivalents. But for instance, we had the economic, the budget of January, and none of that is reflected yet.
None of that's reflected in it. But at the time when you were thinking about this, what was causing the reduction? Was it just retirements and not filling those positions, or? More
often than not, we were not actually anticipating any reduction. It's just that at that point in time, because we're not looking at the full year expenditure picture, which in the case of the CRA, we are always reliant on subs A, often subs B and C, to get the funding for budget measures announced prior to after the formulation of the main estimate.
So for me reading this, right, I could say, hey, look what CRA is doing a good job there, and if that's your view, they're reducing number of staff. Like, I don't know if you know this, I'm sure you do, but if you look at the main estimates, there's you at $2.8 billion in personnel, Treasury Board about $3 billion, about the same, HRDC's half, about $1.6 billion, defense is higher, but you're one of the highest spending in the personnel area. And I see this going up. So should I not take solace that this number is somewhat accurate, or like I don't, why is it here then?
At a point in time, based on the approved authorities and the FTEs that we can afford with those approved authorities, that's accurate. But I'm just saying when it comes time to look back on 2009-10, there will probably be adjustments throughout the year that will also be reflected in the full-time equivalents. Now, having said that, Mr. Chair, we have a constant program of transforming our business to try to become more efficient, particularly with the use of technology. And on any given program area, we can show that year over year we achieve efficiencies.
Can I ask you another question from this chart on page 12? You've got appeals going up relatively significantly compared to everything else in terms of planned spending for 2009-2010. It goes from the forecast of 117 to 126. Is there a reason for that increase in appeals that you're expecting?
Well, yes. First of all, we've had an increase in the volume of activity in our appeals generally overall. I'll give you one example. There's been a well-known cases around charitable gifting shelters.
Right.
We've got thousands and thousands of cases in the appeals system. So we've had a workload increase. We've also augmented our ability to reply to service-related complaints and provide service to the Office of the Taxpayers Ombudsman, and so that accounts for the increases right there.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. You'll have another round, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Mr. McKay, please.
I wanted to go back to this bouncing ball issue of Nortel, GDS, et cetera, and I'll direct my questions to finance rather than revenue, since revenue seems to be unable or unwilling to exercise the discretion. It is absolutely true that equality of treatment under the law is the hallmark of our society, and if we have situations where one part of the country receives one tax treatment and another part of the country receives another tax treatment, it's pretty hard to reconcile those two thoughts. So I wanted to ask again, since the bankruptcy of Nortel is imminent, and a lot of employees, both in Nortel and in other high-tech companies who receive compensation in the form of stock options, are going to get clobbered. They're going to absolutely get clobbered, and you're going to be looking at some pretty tragic situations. In fact, you already are looking at tragic situations. So I want to know, flat out, what is it the Government of Canada is prepared to do about these situations? Are these folks, is it reasonable to anticipate that these folks will receive the same treatment as the JDS folks receive?
Thank you. I think your question is at least a mix of policy and administration, but I will speak to what I draw from it in terms of the policy question. In relation to stock options, the Income Tax Act taxes employee stock options as an employee benefit. Depending on the type of stock option, the full amount of the benefit may be taxable, or for certain qualifying options issued at market price at the time the option is granted, there may be reduced taxation of the benefit. But that benefit, whether full or partial, is taxed as employment income, just as I am taxable on my employment income. If the employee chooses to keep their stock, what the Act does, the Income Tax Act does, is treat that employee as it would anybody else who has used their income to make an investment in the market. That is, they're taxable on the employment benefit, and the gain or loss following that point in time is taxable at capital gains rates or is allowed as a capital loss. And without speaking specifically of particular taxpayers or particular corporations, I believe that's the treatment that arises in these cases. The employment income is taxable, and the consequent loss is treated as you or I would be treated if we had a loss.
You've got a huge policy hole here. In fact, it's such a huge policy hole that it actually puts us at a competitive disadvantage with other countries. And there doesn't seem to be any appetite on the part of the government to address this hole. It's not only it's a personal tragedy, which seems to be acknowledged, but it also is a policy gap. So the U.S. seems to have responded to it. Other countries, to my knowledge, don't have this problem. It's not as if we haven't seen this train coming down the tracks. What are you doing to address this inconsistency?
Well, again, as a policy matter, I can only speak to what the law does today. I'm not in a position to sort of table any or announce any changes to it.
With greatest respect, sir, if I ask Mr. Baker, all we get is the answer, well, that's a ministerial discretion. The ministerial discretion sometimes gets exercised, sometimes doesn't. I talk to you and you say, well, the policy is this. Well, I know what the policy is. The policy has a huge hole in it. The minister, for whatever reason, is not prepared to exercise the discretion. Those two thoughts don't live in the same universe. We have an injustice here. We have an inequality of treatment of taxpayers. What is the government going to do?
Again, I can't offer any announcement of a change today. I can only observe that the treatment today is the same as we would have in other circumstances where, whether it's employment income, business income, or other sources of income, if you take that and invest it and lose money on your investment, you remain taxable on your income.
I understand that. I understand that. So essentially, following this bouncing ball, we essentially have to call your ministers in and say, both to the Minister of Finance and to the Minister of Revenue, what are you going to do, because you as officials from the policy department aren't prepared to announce any changes in policy, and you as officials from Revenue are not prepared to recommend an exercise in discretion. Is that where we're at?
Point of order, Mr. Menzies.
With all due respect, Mr. McKay, I think these are questions for question period. We set the policy. These people carry it out. Let's keep to why we've asked these individuals here, and that's to deal with the main estimates. Ask us the questions about policy decisions, but these people shouldn't have to answer that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Has he used up my time?
Your time is already over, but Mr. McKay has posed a question. I mean, if the officials wish to answer, but if they feel it's outside the parameters in terms of their responsibility. Mr. Irwine? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll be very quick. It's no, we're not in a position to offer anything more than we already have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cramp, please.
Actually, I'd like to address just a concern from a number of people, not just in my riding, but across this country, to our CRA folks. And it's with regard to Aboriginal situation with reserve capacities and exceptions that are made and not made with collection. Do you have any estimate of the amount of tax that is not collected from the sale of products sold to off-reserve purchases by reserve sources? As an example, cigarettes, fuel oil, furnace, gasoline, lumber, people that buy product like this on reserve but sold to off-reserve sources, so obviously would not be ordinarily eligible to purchase. Do you have any estimates for amount of tax loss on this?
No, I don't have any estimates on that. You know, in the case of contraband cigarettes, for instance, there have been some estimates that have been used, but they have not differentiated contraband that may have emanated from reserves versus non-reserves.
Right, but what about legitimate product? Gasoline, fuel oil, diesel, propane, lumber, computers.
Our compliance activities are designed to address any non-compliance around those laws, and we could look and see what results we may have with respect to audits and so on that have been carried out in that area, but I'm not equipped to have that answer.
It would be interesting to pay some attention to that. It's estimated to be in the, not millions, into the billions and billions of dollars. I can tell you anecdotally from personal experience on many of these situations that it is absolutely over the top. And this is not a question of trying to deal with a particular individual or a group or a circumstance. As even as Mr. McKay and others around the table have stated, what we're looking at is this similar and same treatments for tax laws to be administered. And there appears to be a wide variance, and I'm just bringing that to your attention. I would certainly hope that at some particular point you could have some investigation done to see if this is a problem to the extent that it is believed to be a problem by many sources in the House.
Yes, if I might, just a couple of points on that, Mr. Chair. we do have an active compliance program of audits, investigations that look at whatever the taxpayer is, whatever the entity is, in cases where we have reason to believe there's non-compliance, and we take the necessary measures in that case, particularly with respect to sales. You may be aware as well that the government has had for many years now an initiative to encourage First Nations groups to implement First Nations sales tax. And that is an opportunity to address that issue, because effectively they collect their own tax, and the revenue remains on reserve, but it does allow the opportunity for a level playing field, and that's something that certainly both our colleagues in finance and the CRA encourage First Nations to consider.
Okay, thank you. Slipping over to another question. The actual status of your delinquency accounts, do you have an actual breakdown in a couple of areas, the amount of arrears in either corporate versus personal, and basically do you have a 30, 60, 90 or an uncollectible amount? Do you have breakdowns like that you could either present or anecdotally tell us about?
We have more detail on that than you would ever want to know, and I'd be happy to provide the committee. I'm not carrying it with me today, sir, but I'll be happy to provide the committee with a breakdown.
Well, I think that would be helpful to committee if you could provide us with that at some point. And just one, talking about the same subject then. Now, where are you going now with your projections on the delinquency? Obviously, we're into a changing economic time. Have you revised your projections either upward as far as what your arrears will be? And if you haven't, why not?
Well, it's certainly a situation we're looking at, and particularly for the individual taxpayers, what's happening in the economy tends to lag a little bit in terms of how that's reflected in their tax debt. We're watching it closely, but also it's important to know that our tax collection program is not static. We've invested a considerable amount of money in the last few years and are continuing to in what we call our Integrated Revenue Collections Project, which is designed to improve our capacity to, it's going to make the whole collections function smarter in terms of identifying risk earlier and taking appropriate action. So we're going to have two factors at play, probably an economic situation that may create more accounts receivable. At the same time, we're attempting to transform our business to be more responsive.
Just a quick comparison, how do we rate with other countries around the world from a point of arrears and collection?
We're all about the same, and I can say that because there is a forum with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that does look at debt collection. We're a member of that, and we all kind of live the same life.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Hall-Finley again.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you. And I actually have a couple of questions on the public-private partnership program. This was announced with not inconsiderable fanfare in 2007. Not much happened. In fact, there was nothing in 08-09. And I had understood that a little while ago a corporate shell was incorporated to be the office, and now we have a significant amount of money. But I would like to ask about the details of it. So we have a little over $10 million for payments to the corporate entity, PPP Canada Inc., for operations and program delivery, and almost 73 million for payments to the company for fund investments themselves. And so I don't know who specifically I can address this to, but whoever is who's best positioned, if you can elaborate on what the $10.1 million will go, which strikes me as being a fairly significant amount of money for the operations of an office. And also, if you can provide any detail on what seems to be a very specific number, $72.8 million for fund investments, what that money has been allocated for.
Right, and I'll let my colleague Richard Botham, who's the General Director of our Economic Development and Corporate Finance branch, answer the question.
Great, thank you.
I don't have a specific breakdown of the $10 million and all the expenses that would be used against. If that's something that you'd like particular detail on, I can follow up on that. But in general, the expenditures are being undertaken to establish, as you say, a new corporation. The expenses will involve both hiring staff, creating office space. The corporation is being established this year. This will be the first year of operations, so there are some new expenditures that are undertaken for that purpose. But if you want details on how those are being that money is being spent. I'll have to provide that at a later date.
So yes, actually, I would appreciate that. And again, just reiterating, over $10 million to set up an office. Setting up a corporate entity doesn't cost us that much, and so knowing what the office expenditures are for would be helpful. And then the second part of it, as I said, is a fairly specific number, $72.8 million, at a time when we have expressed significant concern and opposition that infrastructure funding has been announced since 2007 repeatedly, and in a number of cases multiple times the same announcement for infrastructure spending. Can you elaborate on what that $72.8 million is supposed to be for?
Again, that's something I'll have to get back to you on. I know that the corporation plans to launch its first call for proposals in coming weeks, and I expect that the $72 million is connected with that. But I can provide you with additional details based on the corporate plan that the corporation has filed.
Well, if there hasn't even yet been a call for proposals, and that's expected to be launched at some time, and given our concern that most of the infrastructure programs announced almost 3 years ago have not nearly come through with the money originally promised, I'm concerned about the time frame and what this money would be even considered for, absent even an idea of what the proposals might be. So it strikes me as a bit odd that I have no answer for that. I mean, I appreciate, yes, I would like to have the detail of that, but I'm a bit, how would these numbers have been arrived at? Especially the 72 point.
But it is not unusual for Parliament, for there be a request to Parliament to seek funds for something for a general purpose, for a call for proposals in advance of knowing what those proposals are. I don't think that's extraordinary.
But how would that number be achieved? There has to be something behind it, and maybe you could tie that in and with a bit of an explanation of what kind of proportions that $73 million would play in the world of P3 infrastructure investment.
Yeah. I will come back to you with the details on how those estimates were derived and how that fits into the corporate plan for the coming year.
Okay, that information would be very helpful.
We can provide you with that information.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Just follow up on Ms. Hall Finley's question in the sense of, I mean, we are as parliamentarians going to be asked to vote on that. So if we can get that be within the next week or so here, that would be very helpful, because all as committee members are going to be asked to allocate that funding. So I have a couple of questions here. The main one relating to the Canada Health transfer. I note that the Canada Health transfer, in terms of the main estimates for 2009-10, it's a substantial increase in terms of transfers to the provinces. There is a concern raised in my home province of Alberta by the Finance Minister of Alberta. She's raised the concern that Alberta is receiving $700 million less through the Canada Health transfer than it ought to receive, and I just wanted to get a formal response on that.
Yes, provinces receive equal support through the Canada Health transfer through a mix of tax points that were transferred back in 1977 and the cash transfer. And the cash transfer is increasing at 6% a year. The government announced in Budget 2007 that the Canada Health transfer would move to an equal per capita cash allocation. So the tax points would no longer be considered in the calculation after 2013-14. But until then, they are still part of the calculation, and so provinces are receiving equal support through this mix of tax points and cash. Alberta's tax points are worth significantly more than tax points in some other provinces, so its cash is correspondingly lower.
So the $700 million figure is arrived at only if you look at the cash transfer and exclude the tax point transfer, or the tax points.
It's in relation to the total support is the same for all provinces, but the share that comes from cash in the case of Alberta is lower because the value of its tax points are higher.
So in terms of per capita funding, if you add in both, then Alberta is receiving equal in terms of a per capita amount through both tax points and cash.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And the second point I wanted to raise was with respect to the CRA. And I think in general, you hear from colleagues around the table, there's a lot of respect for the CRA from both citizens and parliamentarians. But I did want to raise one concern, and that is with both citizens in terms of individual taxpayers and in terms of businesses. They have raised anecdotally with my office, and I presume with other offices, with respect to how they are treated by auditors from CRA in certain points. And one of the particular things they raise is that a citizen or a family or a business will often deal with one or two or three or four tax auditors, and the continuity in terms of dealing with someone at CRA and the difficulties that raises for the taxpayer increase in the sense of they almost have to restart again explaining to the person from CRA what the situation is, what the case is. And in their view, it prolongs the case, it makes it more difficult. So is this is given to me anecdotally, is this in fact the case in many cases? And if so, is CRA doing anything to address that?
Mr. Chair, it is the case in some cases anyway. And the issue we're managing as a large institution is, like everybody in the world today, we're experiencing quite a demographic change and quite a turnover of staff right now. A number of people taking their retirement, and the CRA being a career organization, essentially as someone leaves on retirement, that creates a domino effect inside the organization, and people get an opportunity to compete for more senior positions. One of the consequences is we are experiencing some challenges with continuity on certain of our audit files. Two things in response to that. One is, first of all, this problem will mitigate over time as the bulge works its way through the system. But secondly, we're investing a sizable amount of money in what we call the Compliance Systems Redesign Project, which is designed to automate and create information technology tools to support auditors so that even if the auditor changes, we don't miss a beat moving forward. And hopefully, as that is just starting to unroll this year, it's a multi-year project, but as that takes hold, we're expecting taxpayers will feel a higher level of service.
I appreciate that. And any information you have with respect to the length of time that a case typically takes from start to completion, any reporting you have on that would be much appreciated.
All right.
I'm now going to move to Ms. Hughes, I believe, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci. Alors, Monsieur Baker, vous avez mentionné que...
Mr. Baker, you said that the Corporate Tax Administration for Ontario is an initiative that is a component that is worth $78.2 million to conclude the implementation of this initiative. Did you carry out any modeling on this program and exactly how much it's going to cost after the fact? Absolutely. We undertook many studies, and we did elaborate modeling. I have the forecast. I don't have the forecast with me, but there are a few elements of these expenditures that tie back to past expenditures and this year's expenditures. They go back to the 1st of April, and we're obviously going to track our costs, but we are achieving savings over time. You also say, with respect to the $429 million paid out under the Softwood Lumber Products Export Charge Act, does the $429 million include administrative expenditures and costs? Another question is something perhaps you may not be able to answer, but are any of these costs going to be taken up by the provinces? And will they be taken from a general consolidation fund, or is there going to be a percentage that is going to be charged to the forestry industry? Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask my colleague, Mr. Ralston, to elaborate, but I'd also like to provide further information on the Corporate Tax Administration for Ontario initiative.
So the answer is the amount shown of $429 million is the net amount. The law provides that we administer an export charge, deduct the costs of the administration, and then distribute the net amount to the provinces from which I guess the exporters, in which the exporters resided. So that's the general scheme of financing for that program.
Do you have an estimate as to the administration costs? Excuse me.
About $8 million a year. And now, if I can just go back to that to the question about the Corporate Tax Administration for Ontario. As Mr. Baker mentioned, we did expend a large sum in the early years to get it up and running, but our current estimates show that in the long run we should level out at about $43 million, roughly speaking, as the ongoing costs of administering that effort.
I still have some time? Okay. I just want to ask, as well as in the constituency offices, I find that some of the bulk of our work deals a lot with the child tax credit. And there's a lot of issues pertaining to the administration, especially when a couple separates and one of them doesn't indicate that there's a change of address. And I'm just wondering, are you revisiting that at all? Because it's causing a lot of hardships for these families, and we find that there certainly is a demand out there to have that revisited. So I'm just got some curiousness on that.
It is a difficult one because what families do and the information they provide us, we're trying to always catch up with what the reality is to ensure that we're making the correct decision on that. We certainly have beefed up our information products around the child tax benefits so that people understand the rules with respect to split families and so on and how that is administered. But in terms of any changes, again, I can't speak of any specific changes to the overall determination criteria for the benefit. One of the things that we're doing related to that we've started in the last year is we're building direct links with the provincial birth registries, and we've started that in a number of provinces to help us get real-time information so that we can activate the child tax benefit as soon as possible. That should help.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Pichetti, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to witnesses. Always fun to have department officials here. Just two quick questions, Mr. Baker. One of them is mainly on an administrative point of view. You just said that your ultimate goal is to provide the best service that you can provide to taxpayers. My understanding is in Montreal, if you present yourself to CRE downtown and you want to pull your file or you want to ask a question, they refer you to the phone and then you get an operator somewhere else other than a live person. Is that correct? Is that the gist of the?
What you'd be referring to is if someone walks into any tax services office.
Well, I'm talking about the one in Montreal. Okay, well, I haven't verified it, so I'm asking you first.
Well, it could be Montreal. You walk into the Montreal Tax Services office and you want information. First of all, that information may not be in that tax office. For instance, the tax file is probably residing at the Shawinigan Tax Center or somewhere like that. So what we encourage people to do, if we don't have it, we'll try to help them, of course, with the counter staff that are there. But if it's not there, we try to teach people how to access it through the computer or through the 1-800 number, and we make those that available. The number of people walking into our offices in the last number of years is down considerably because more and more people are taking advantage of the website. And secondly, we increased significantly our capacity to deal with telephone calls this last year. We made about a $30 million investment, so people are getting service that way.
I understand that. We have the same problem as constituents. I prefer, my constituents call and make an appointment so that, we can address their problems. But the constituents that do come to our office and we don't turn them away. We do give them service. So I'm just asking that is not the rationale of CRA. My understanding is you don't have an agent that will sit down with them and take them through the process. My understanding is that's what happens with Revenue Quebec, but that's not what happens with CRA.
No, that's not completely correct. If we don't have anybody who has the information to serve the person, first of all, we'll see if there's an alternative channel to serve them, as I identified. If not, we'll make an appointment with that individual and make sure we've got the information and the right agent in place to answer their queries.
But nobody will sit down with them and perhaps help them even make the phone call or perhaps look on the screen with them, because the people that will come,
we do that all the time.
Normally, that will happen.
That will happen.
Okay.
That will happen. Now, it's a very small percentage of our taxpayers actually come into an office.
No, I understand that, but I'm just wondering the small percentage of people that do present themselves there will be helped by an agent even if they have to wait?
What we are organized to do is whenever possible we'll try to take care of that taxpayer. Now, of course, depending on the time of the year, that there could be a wait associated with that. Try to help them one way or another, and all else fails, we'll set up an appointment and make sure that...
Because I'm going to go down to that Montreal office, and if that doesn't happen, I'll be back and ask you the same question.
No,
you know that.
Do that, and tell me when you're going to be there. I'll make sure that
Stop buying those boats, will you? Quick question on the estimates. The contributions in support of the charities regulatory reform, I think you mentioned it in your opening remarks, or is it no, actually it's not the same one. The capacity, the expanding capacity to combat terrorist financing through charities, you have 4.7 million. How do we know that you're getting your money's worth? What are the conditions imposed on that amount of money? What is the ultimate goal? To catch how many terrorists, or how do we know that the money is being utilized?
Sure. Mr. Chair, I'll give you a general response, and I believe Jim Ralston has some specifics. What this is designed to do, of course, is to be able to conduct the right analysis on monies that are flowing through charities, look at the connections between charities in order to ascertain at the end of the day whether money that is being collected through the charitable tax regime is ultimately being used to finance terrorist organizations. It's a heavy analytical investment, as you can imagine, because it's not as simple as a charity involved. It usually involves many charities and the flow of funds between them. So we try to track that, because at the end of the day we want to be able to provide some assurance.
So it's a specific department?
Yes, we have a dedicated unit in the Charities Directorate that
and it's funded separately from the rest of the CRA?
No. This is what I referred to earlier. The $4+ million was an increase in the funding to improve our capacity to do that.
And would it be for personnel or technology?
It would be both.
Both. Okay.
And I'm not sure if Jim, if you have more to add.
I think you've pretty much covered.
Okay, I think I've got
so
that covered.
So that would have nothing. You wouldn't necessarily refer that to FinTrax, or that would be within CRA. I think
this is all part of the government's anti-terrorism initiative, and of course we have relationships. We receive referrals from FinTrack, and of course we also work closely with the Department of Public Safety.
My time's almost up, so I just have to ask this question. The taxpayers ombudsman.
Last question.
Yeah, taxpayers ombudsman. We didn't have a budget last year. Newly created department. It's going to be under CRA. You're responsible for the funding, but it's supposed to be independent. Are you comfortable with that? And who came up with the 3.3?
Well, when the government decided to create a taxpayers ombudsman, work was done on the defining the mandate through the Ordering Council, and of course from that we developed an estimate of what the annual operating costs would be for the taxpayers ombudsman. Mr. Dubé, the ombudsman, has been in office now for a little over a year. He's getting through one tax season as we speak, and we'll be in a position to assess shortly whether we set that
so
right.
You're working with him?
Okay, thank you.
On the budget side, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Baker, in answer to one of my questions earlier, I didn't have the impression that the thousands and thousands of people who are concerned in the three examples that I raised would be very happy with your answer. I know that we are restricted in time, but the fundamental point that I wanted to hear from you is that you will comply with the acts that are passed in the House of Commons. But in the case of a notice that you send when you carry out an audit, There's a difference between someone who has overseen certain elements in their tax return or who inadvertently made mistakes. But when it comes to changes in policy and administering policies, those people aren't being fraudulent. They're not trying to cheat the system. And you're telling me that it's no longer the case. But the money that you're asking for now is much higher than in previous years. How are you going to apply the policy? How are you going to send a notice to people and notify them that the policy was erroneous and that they have 90 days, for example, to come back with their arguments? Otherwise, you are going to come down with your appropriate measures. Otherwise, people who are stressed and who are panicked will say that they simply are unable to pay up their owed taxes. So is it the act that is forcing you to act in such a manner, in such a brusque manner, or is this a regular custom in the Canadian tax system?
Based on the principle of responsibility of the individual taxpayers to make the proper declaration of taxes payable, we do whatever we need to do to assist them. And if you've been on our website, or we've got publications, and we work with tax professional groups to make sure the information is out there. Certainly, if there is a change in tax policy, we both between the Department of Finance and the CRA, we make efforts to communicate that change so that people are not caught by surprise. And in our determination of any penalties or adjustments, we obviously look at timing issues around that to try to be aware of that. I think you were also referring in the latter part of your comment to challenges today of people paying taxes owed. And I mentioned earlier we have some flexibility under the Act to work out payment arrangements to help people. But at the end of the day, a tax debt is a tax debt. Taxpayers expect other taxpayers to pay their taxes, and that's what we have to accomplish.
Bon, merci. Je vais laisser le temps qui me reste à mon collègue.
Thank you. I'm going to share my remaining time with my colleague, Mr. Laforêt. Mr. Baker, in 2007, the Department of Finance had introduced measures to crack down on a double deduction for businesses that had their headquarters above and beyond our borders. And in 2009, that decision was reversed to prevent tax evasion being practiced on the part of certain corporations. Do you know how much the government is going to see in foregone revenue since the change? Do you have those figures? And could you share them with us, please?
With your permission, Mr. Chair, I'm asking Wayne Adams, who is our Senior Technical Officer in the CRA, to reply to that question.
Thank you very much for the question. The provision you're referring to is a measure that was tabled by our colleagues in the Department of Finance, 18.2, to deal with certain interest deductibility. It had a nickname, double dips. We appeared before this committee, I believe, 2 years ago. That measure was repealed. It means that if companies are now entitled to certain deductions for monies they laid out, that wouldn't be a field in the corporate tax return that we'd be able to capture and report back to you. It was determined by the panel to review international taxation that that measure was harmful to Canada, and the decision was made to repeal it.
Mais ma question, c'est pas de savoir
I understand the system, but how much will the government lose by repealing that measure? What is the amount of money that the government is going to forego in future years? And if you don't know now, could you please forward the answer later?
I was going to say, when the measure was first proposed, there was an estimate in the budget documents of how much it was thought to be recovered, and those estimates would largely be our colleagues at the Department of Finance.
Okay. Do we have a brief answer?
A very brief answer. The measure was projected to come into effect only in 2011 or 2012, I believe. And the revenue estimates for the repeal of 18.2 are $80 million for 2012-13, $105 million for 2013-2014.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Wallace, please.
And we're going to move on now with CRA a little bit. Recently, the Auditor General did an audit on your auditing of small and medium-sized business enterprises. And in her report, there was from a previous report in 2004, and I think in 2009 they audited the same thing. It comes down to there were 13 recommendations, and she says we consider 6 to be most important, and progress was unsatisfactory in 4 of 6. And often you don't get a chance to rebut, other than you say here that you disagree with their emphasis on the recommendations. So I'm giving you a chance to talk about what she found and why you disagree. I can go through them one by one, or if you can just give us an overview. They'll do that for you, Bill.
I'll try to be brief. This was a follow-up report on 2 previous audits that had been undertaken, and there were in those 2 previous audits there were actually 21 total recommendations. This follow-up audit focused on 13 recommendations. Right. And they assessed our progress against those 13 recommendations. At the end of the day, we were judged to have succeeded on 7 of the 13 recommendations, but the Auditor General felt that certain of them were more important, which led to the final conclusion. We did not agree with the final conclusion of the Auditor General for a number of reasons. First of all, the methodology to have 7 of 13 be successful, make progress, but not be totally successful in the other 6, I did not feel yielded that overall conclusion. But also the Auditor General's scope of the audit in looking at our efforts to combat the underground economy were overly limited in terms of certain of our audit activities, and it, for instance, did not pick up all the work we do every year on non-filers and non-registrants and the hundreds of millions of dollars of additional tax that's recovered because of that. So I was simply wanting to point out and with the Auditor General, and she was very comfortable with the comment I put in the report, because ultimately we wanted to be able to discuss that openly, that I felt overall the bottom line conclusion was not the fair conclusion.
So based on her recommendation or on her analysis, are you going to do additional things to try to resolve those, or were you on a program to resolve those anyways and just hadn't completed?
No, we are in the process of, Mr. Chair, of providing a detailed response on every one of those recommendations. We're making good progress across the board in all those, and that will be something that will be ultimately reporting to the Public Accounts Committee.
Okay, on another topic, our government has indicated you went through a strategic review, and one of the things that you decided was that you would take back in-house the collections of things like long-term, student debts and so on that had been sent out to the private sector. And in the estimates, you have a significant reduction in the costs of paying out to those third-party collection agencies. Can you tell me based on what is the plan in terms of, are you hiring more people to do that collection, and are you going to collect the same amount of money? Because we don't see the revenue side on these things, we only see the expense side. So, and in this case, it's an expense reduction. So what is the balance, and how long before you're up and running on that?
Sure. Quick comment, then I'll ask Mr. Ralston to give you detail. Clearly, the proposition was there because we were comfortable that we were able to deliver the program results at less cost to government, and that's the whole. So, short answer is yes, but with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'll ask Mr. Ralston to give you a few more details.
So basically, there is an amount offsetting the reduction in the statutory vote for the private collections agencies. There is an increase in our operating vote of around $8.2 million, and that will go to fund increase.
How many bodies is that?
Can't tell you that off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
So what I'm looking for is the answer to that if we've gotten rid, we're reducing our costs to the private sector. We are adding, we're not just adding workload to people already there, we're actually adding numbers of people and their workstations, and so those overhead costs. And we're assuming that we're going to, are we working on the assumption we're going to be able to collect the same amount of money or less?
Same.
So could you provide
30
us with
30
the,
seconds.
Could you provide us with the number of people that is?
Yes.
Appreciate that.
We could.
And finally, just very quickly, on the SHRED program, you've talked about enhancement to the effectiveness of the SHRED program, which I'm on industry committee. That's why I want to ask. What do you mean by the effectiveness? What does this additional money going to do to enhance this program?
We've been doing a number of things to try to continue to enhance the delivery of the scientific research experimental development tax credit. New money in the last while has gone into the hiring, for instance, of more scientists, because as you know, in determining whether an expenditure is eligible for the scientific research experimental development tax credit, there's an element of science to determine if it's eligible science, eligible research, and then of course there's the accounting side of it to look at what is the proper amount. We've beefed up our scientific capacity. We've also done a number of things in the last year with additional money to improve the service of small businesses. There's 18,000 businesses that benefit from SR&ED in a given year for a total tax expenditure of around $4 billion. But there's been a long-standing issue making sure that in particular new businesses who are not necessarily thinking about taxes are aware of the availability of the program and receive the services they need.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. We'll go to Mr. McKay, please.
By annual standards, the amount of the percentage amount of increase that you're asking for transfer payments is enormous. You're wanting to go from $46 billion to $5.7 billion, which is it's a lot of money, almost $5 billion, in and around just under 10% of your 10% increase year over year. Now, that's way beyond real GDP, way beyond nominal GDP, and it is, as I say, by anybody's standards, an enormous amount of money in transfers, and it counts for a significant component of the government's budget. So, can you tell me why these amounts, particularly with respect to the fiscal equalization and the Canada Health Transfer, are such huge jumps year over year? It's enormous, given the general rule of thumb, which is government revenues grow at usually nominal GDP. So somehow or another, this is going to have to be paid for, and it either comes out of other program spending or it comes out of tax revenue. So, can you give me the explanation as to why your jump in transfers is borderline 10%?
Yeah, the main components are the CST, which grows by an escalator was set for it in budget 2007 of 3%. The largest transfer is the Canada Health Transfer, and as part of the 10-year agreement, 2004-5 agreement to strengthen health care, that transfer, the cash component of that transfer, is growing by 6% a year, legislated out to 2013-14. Equalization in the mains is showing a significant increase. That reflects the formula that was in place prior to measures announced in November and passed in the budget implementation bill to put equalization on a sustainable growth path. So the number in the mains is higher than the actual amount that will be provided for equalization by 1.8. I could calculate it here, but it's roughly $1.8, $1.9 billion.
Yeah, you look like on your equalization you're jumping $2.4 billion. So, what component of the $2.4 billion is legislatively driven, and what component is simply a built-in escalator?
Well, the measures that were put in place in the budget implementation bill have set equalization program on a sustainable growth path. Basically, it's the average of the three-year average of GDP growth, nominal GDP growth. So in the 9-10, it's roughly I think it's 4.1 or 4.2% growth. It will move in line with that three-year average of GDP growth.
But you're from going 08, 09 to 09, 010. That's way more than 3 or 4%.
Yes, the actual amount will be about $14 billion once the measures in the measures in budget bill, implementation bill are reflected in the amount. So the amount in the budget itself reflects the measures that were in the implementation budget implementation.
I'm not sure where you're getting your 14 billion. You're going from 13.6 to 16.
The 16 is based on the formula that was in place prior to measures that were announced last November and implemented in the budget.
So just so that I understand it, if nothing happened, you would be at 14 billion. But because of the legislative measures, you're at 16 billion?
No, it's actually the reverse. If nothing would have happened, we would have been at 16 billion. Because of the measures put in place in the budget implementation bill, we're at just over 14 billion for 9/10. And that amount will grow in line with the 3-year average of nominal GDP.
Okay. But how much time we got left? 30 seconds. Just a quick question then. The relationship between the incentives for the province to eliminate capital taxes, good idea, with the payment to Ontario budget of $150 million, 123 to 150. Is there a relationship between those two lines?
What relationship were you referring to?
Well, I'm looking at the payment to Ontario of $150 million. Was that simply a one-off in 08-09?
Oh, I'll let Brian Ernewine, who's the General Director of Tax Policy, answer that.
The 150 is part of the transitional payment for the participation by Ontario in the corporate tax collection agreement for the federal government to join, or for the Ontario to join in the federal administration of the provincial Ontario corporate income tax.
Okay, I understand
it's not related to the capital tax.
What? Oh, there won't be any round. We know that. I just want to see whether there's a connection between the two of them. No. No. Okay. There. See, we don't need another round.
We don't need another round. Good. Mr. Wallace will probably take it then. Yeah. Mr. Wallace, please.
Finish up a little bit with sharing one question for finance. The reason I come back to it on the numbers on what's happening with the private sector comparison, and then the numbers that are in here, you know, I expected to see numbers go up a little bit, at least to in terms of employees, and it's not here. It's not reflected. So I look like, in my view, because that program was announced last year, we're just getting around to it now. So it should have been reflected in the estimates, as far as I'm concerned. I thought it was interesting that the numbers went down in terms of employees, but there's a new program that you're assuming that may have caused some changes. So that's why, for us to have the proper information to make decent decisions, it's great to have that information. My question, just a quick one. There's been lots of discussion in the House about HST in other provinces, including Quebec. Do we pay Quebec to collect our GST, and what would that amount be every year?
Yes, we've had an arrangement with Quebec from the outset for the administration of the tax, and this year the payment is roughly $135 million.
And how long have we been paying that $135 million?
Oh, almost, I think, virtually from the beginning. It goes back to shortly after the launch of the GST in the early 90s.
So 20 years, whatever it's been. 50, what is the, well, okay, about 15 years then, I guess, right?
Roughly.
Okay, so we've been paying that amount to them, and but the two taxes are completely separate. There's a GST and a QST. Is that not correct? There's not an HST in Quebec.
It's a single administration, but collecting two taxes.
And we pay them for that collection.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to be sure of that. The one little question I have, just for my information, I noticed a change in the reporting, and I'll pick on FinTrack just because there's no change to the actual amounts, except for it's split up, and I think we call it now internal services, and I couldn't find internal services prior, even though the number adds to be the same. What caused that change, and what does that mean, internal services?
In prior years, Treasury Board Secretariat had asked all departments to reflect internal corporate services, things like financial, communication, legal, HR support, as part of and incorporated in each program activity. Starting with these main estimates, they have asked departments to reflect those costs as a separate and intact program activity. So it's a change in reporting structure from prior fiscal years.
And the reason for that was just to be more, just to expose more what those costs are, or do you have any sense of why they asked you to do that?
My sense would be for the transparency of those costs.
Okay, I appreciate that. One more question for CRA. You're paying out to the provinces the softwood lumber agreement piece. I don't see anywhere else where to me, you're the tax collector, not the payer. Is there any other programs you actually pay out, in a sense, or why is the softwood lumber agreement attached to you and not to, say, natural resources or another department altogether?
Well, are there other programs where we pay out? Absolutely. There's a lot of tax credits.
Correct, tax
that
credits,
we administer child care benefits and all that stuff. The policy lead on the softwood lumber agreement is, of course, Department of International Trade, Foreign Affairs International Trade. But they do not have a domestic machinery in place to actually deal with there's about 1,800, over 1,000 producers, and dealing with the provinces, the ability to do all of the financial work that's required. So we were tasked with the administration of the agreement.
And so when I look at the 17% or whatever number it is off the top of my head increase in your budget this year, a fair chunk of that is the implementation of the softwood lumber agreement payments. Is that part of that number?
Well, in terms of the overall year-over-year increase, it's the vast majority of the number. And part of that is we've only been at this for a while, and last year's mains didn't have it. It was covered under SUPs. So this is the first time you're actually seeing it in the mains.
Okay.
But this will be as long as we have an agreement, there'll be a recurring charge. So.
Am I done?
Well, we have 3 rounds, but the Liberals are not going to take their rounds, so you can actually.
Just one question.
You want to continue and then we'll.
One question. Just one question. You did mention that the subs are important to you guys because of I'm assuming it's because the budget timing. What should we as the Finance Committee, what should we be expecting in terms of subs from you guys this year that is not captured in the mains? If you have any idea what that would be, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I can't speculate on an amount. There's a process, of course, to do that, and you will hear about that in due course. But certainly, you have to go back to the 2009 budget, of course, and the measures that are in there that we are tasked with administering. Perhaps the single most noteworthy would be the home renovation tax credit.
Thank you.
And that will certainly be featured in subs.
Thank you.
Or whatever funding mechanism is available to us over the coming year.
Thank you. That was it.
Okay. Thank you. Do the Liberals want a quick round, or we can get a quick question from Liberals and NDP to finish up this round? Okay. Ms. Hall-Finley.
Thanks very much. Just a brief, going back to the TIFSA, and I just wanted to ask about the advertising expenses, and it was something that we're dealing with in the SUPs, but I just would like some confirmation going forward now of the amount that has been allocated or spent or to be spent in terms of advertising. The concern was that in the CRA piece there was $6 million allocated for advertising of TIFSA, which seems an awfully big number given that the banks seem to have been doing an awful lot of advertising for TIFSA. And then we learned that there was a significant portion of the finance advertising budget, which is a big budget, was also allocated for TIFSA. So maybe just a quick question and confirmation of the advertising budget from CRA that was allocated to TIFSA, and if somebody from finance can confirm what portion, how much money from the finance advertising piece was dedicated to TIFSA.
We certainly have a figure, and Mr. Chair, I'll ask Mr. Ralston to give you the figure.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so there's an amount of $6 million in our budget for an advertising campaign for the 2009 tax season, so next year's, and it's going to be similar to this year's. In other words, you may recall the focus this year was on taking advantage of the various tax measures that were available to individuals. And I believe we're going to pretty much follow that same theme for next year. So it's not specifically in any way connected to tax-free savings account. It's more that general program of taking advantage of the credits that are available to individuals.
Okay, thank you. And if somebody from Finance can speak to the portion of the advertising budget.
In the 2008-09 Supplementary Estimates B, an amount of $5 million was provided to the Department for advertising related to TISFA. In 08-09.
So 5 million, so that's 11 million. Acknowledging 6 million, not completely just for TIFSA, but Finance also had another 5 million. Just for the record, that's an awful lot of money when, as I said, the banks seem to have been spending an awful lot of time and effort money advertising TIFSA themselves. So just, I guess, a question on the value of the government also advertising the same thing. Did you?
Yes. Alan Freeman. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for Consultations and Communications at Finance. Just to make it clear, the $5 million allocated to TIFSA by the Department of Finance was spent in 2008-2009. There's nothing in the estimates for us, for the Finance Department, to spend on tax-free savings account advertising in 2009-2010.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Very brief question, and then we'll deal with our travel budget request members.
Ma question, c'est pour Monsieur Rachon.
My question is for Mr. Rochon. Earlier, you said that the economic forecasts included in the budget were in fact lower than the average and that you were prudent. And so starting the first month of the second quarter, has anything changed? What has changed? And have you made sure that those changes are reflected in your forecasts? And the operating costs of corporations actually declined much more sharply than was originally predicted. How can you address those issues? Answer. We're always in the midst of tracking what's happening in the economy and understanding what's happening in the economy. We follow tax evolution. We track all of the national, international developments. As regards corporations who, during this fiscal year, have posted lower revenues than what we were counting on, well, it's a general reflection of what's happening on a broad level. Our forecasts are more or less consistent with what was originally presented in the budget. So to answer your question in general terms, are we going to review our forecasts? Well, there wasn't a definitive answer as to that decision. It's up to the government to decide when it will present an official new forecast.
Today and for responding to our questions on the estimates. It's been a very informative session. Anything that has to be followed up, if you can, provide that information to the clerk as soon as possible. We will ensure all members get it. We want to thank you for your attendance here today. Colleagues, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, next Tuesday from 9:30 to 10:30 in this room, we do have a meeting with the delegation from Pakistan. I believe it's members of their Finance Committee. So we will be here for an hour from 9:30 to 10:30. And the second thing is the request that I will be making, or hopefully making, of the Liaison Committee today with respect to our proposed short trip to Washington. You all have the travel budget request and the justification for travel in front of you. Can I get someone to move these?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. McKay.
Just, are we being expected to use our travel points to get down there?
Exactly.
That's a presumption.
Yes.
Okay. When you're in Canada-U.S., it could be a problem. I just want to flag that point because it's if you have 4 points, you can use. I've already used 1 point. This will be my second point, and I'm only in June. And I suspect that's true for pretty well anybody who takes an active role in Canada-U.S. So
I don't mind, but I just want to flag it particularly for anybody who is interested in Canada-U.S. parliamentary affairs, that we're using up our own personal budget in order to be able to participate in committee work. Not quite right.
Well, it's true, and I'm an executive member of Canada-U.S. as well, so it affects me too. But I think the rationale, the first thing the liaison committee would ask me, I presume, would be, why are you not using the points allocated to fly from Ottawa to Washington? So,
all right, well,
if the committee so desires, I could put that forward. But
well, when you're making your presentation, if you'd flag the issue, because I would not like to be in a situation, nor would you, in December or February. We wanted to participate in something and we couldn't go because we've used up our points.
Yeah, fair point. Mr. Pichetti?
Thank you. Just quickly, I just noticed if we claim our points, are we going to be able to ask the committee for the per diem? Aren't we supposed to claim our per diem when we claim our points? That's mainly administrative. I'm not sure. When we claim our points, should we be claiming our per diem as well on our expense reports?
You mean claiming it with your point rather than with the committee?
I don't think we have to. We can claim the per diem here. I mean, we're not doubling up, right? I mean, we can leave it. I can adopt the budget is fine, but just to check that administratively. And I have no problem using my points, but if there are members that need to use their points for Canada-U.S., we can maybe allocate that extra 1 or 2 spots on the budget and increase it if that need be. But I have no problem utilizing my points. I know that's been an issue in the past, even when we traveled on committee.
Okay. Well,
I'll mention that to my Conservative colleagues.
So do members, do they want to amend this request then? Okay. Does anyone want to move it? Or?
I can move it.
Moved by Mr. Pichetti. All in favor of this travel budget request? All opposed? All right. Carried. Mr. Wallace?
People to fill our spots and stuff, when will you know by? Whether it's official. Can we go? Do you know? Is that official? We're happening, or don't you?
I have to go to the liaison subcommittee at 1 o'clock today, and the House must approve it. So the whips have to approve it.
Right. So when will? Is that a short period of time? No idea.
Well, it depends very much on the whips, and as you know, I don't control our whips. So, Monsieur Carrier.
I just want to make sure. Next Thursday, we're not having a meeting. Is that correct? This Thursday. Do we have a meeting this Thursday?
11 a.m. our normal slot. Next week we switch to the 3:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon, Tuesday and Thursday. But Tuesday morning we have the meeting with the delegation from Pakistan, from 9:30 to 10:30.
Okay, merci.
Okay, thank you. Meeting adjourned.